Good morning, everybody. I'm Evelyn Thoren. I am your host this morning. Right now it's the Dawn Patrol. We're from 6 to 7, and then we have City Life from 7 to 8. We hope you'll stay with us. If not, I think, John, this repeats in the afternoon in Lowell, and in Chelmsford we're
Only
on...
the second hour.
Only the second
Only
hour?
the second hour.
Okay, so if you stay with us the first hour, you can watch the second hour this afternoon. Not sure when, but anyway, Sam Chase and Bob Hoey, my co-hosts, they're with us this morning. And at 7 o'clock, we have Chelmsford Town Manager Paul Cohen scheduled to come in. And like I said, we hope you'll stay with us. If you have any questions concerning how Chelmsford runs their town government, save your questions and text them in or call 978-808-8200. And we're also on Facebook, so you could also text those questions there. Now, if you're watching this as a repeat, you still can text questions. And then some of those questions, if you have things about Chelmsford, they'll get back to us and we can talk about them next Thursday.
Everyone will say, I don't know what they're talking about.
Right. No idea what you're talking about.
Well, it's 7 o'clock, Paul Cohen's coming in, so I have something I want to say to him, but I don't want to do it early, so you wait for him to come on.
Right.
That's the hardest part, is
So-
holding it in,
So
because
what-
it has to do with Eric Getcher and inside law. I can't wait to talk about it a
Paul
little
is.
bit.
That's great.
And I say this because if Eric Getcher hears us, he's calling in. It's just
Oh,
the
that's
way
all
it
right.
is,
That's all right.
Yeah.
But in addition to being a town manager in Chelmsford, Paul is also very well plugged into the town manager / city manager network.
Yeah.
Through the Mass Municipal Association, other things. So he's very knowledgeable.
What's Paul making a year?
I think it's 214.
This guy's going to be making 3.
Huh?
St. Tom is going to be making 3.
Wow.
Paul is not in the overpaid category as
He
far
would take
as
it if we gave it to him.
Of course he would.
Right, but for a long time, he was
Wouldn't you?
very
City
underpaid.
council is out of their mind.
Wouldn't you take it if they gave it to you?
Yeah.
Of course you would.
Well, the city has no intention of living within their means. Right now, they're ordering those utility knives so they can actually cut the bottom out of your pocketbook very easily and cut the pockets out of your pants.
Well, that was one of the things on the list. I didn't.
You had a list?
I didn't text.
She always has a list.
I'm a list person.
She has a list.
I didn't text any articles because nothing was, jumped at me because there's just so much going on in Washington, D.C. And then there's also those utility bills that everybody's getting and everybody's complaining about. And I think the governor is going to look into it because apparently her office must be getting an awful lot of complaints.
It's her fault.
Because
She
it has
should
to do
look into it.
because it has to do with how the state legislature allowed the utility companies to increase their bills. Now, Sam, you said you did some research
did.
on this, and Glenn did tell me that our heating bill for last month was over $500.
Thank you, Governor.
I'm so thrilled.
She's
About
already
that.
made a move to send regulators out to do something about it, but
Well,
let's
this is-
see.
And then the question is why.
This is a case of where the state government, through the Department of Public Utilities and the regulators, they caused the problem. And now they're pretending like they don't know anything about it and they're going to go back in and fix it. They're the ones who caused it, okay? So.
Just like Trump caused all the plane crashes. huh?
All right.
I'm just kidding,
Yeah,
Sam.
oh, yeah.
Oh, we'll get into all of that.
It's ridiculous.
That's on the list, too.
It's ridiculous, but the thing is, and I'll talk about the electric bill, the electric situation is not quite as bad as the natural gas situation, so I'll talk about the gas bill. So last month I got my gas bill. Now, I do heat, hot water, natural gas cooking, and I also have a gas fireplace. All right, so I use gas.
A lot of
Okay,
gas,
it isn't just the heat. It's a lot of and dryer. I have a gas dryer. Okay, so everything I have is on gas.
Yes, and so
All
are
right.
we.
So got the gas bill, and it was $702, and I thought. Well, the first thing I thought was, there's something wrong with my heating system, okay? Because as people who watch me now for years know that I always look in the mirror first. I always look inward. I always assume that I'm doing something wrong, okay? So that's the first place I looked. I went back and I looked at what my bill was for the same period the previous year, all right? And my usage was up by almost 40%, and I thought, and because I'm old, I can't remember. So what I had forgotten was that last year at this time was a relatively mild winter, okay? So I went back and I looked up the degree days, and I found out that in this period, we averaged 8 degrees colder per day. All right, I said, okay, now I'm okay with the usage. My furnace is okay, all right? It was a lot colder, so I'm going to use more gas. That I was okay with. But I thought, what's the rate? And then I looked at the bill, and you have two areas. You are billed for the gas itself, and then you are billed for a delivery distribution charge. And my gas for that month, as I said, the bill was $700, okay? The gas was like $200. And the delivery service charge was $500. I said, what the heck is going on? So then I started digging into the delivery charge. And I understand, how that rate structure is. Now, remember, this is all regulated by the state. The gas company and their vendors, the delivery people, they can't arbitrarily set a rate. It has to be approved by the state regulators. So whatever you're billed, that's something that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has sanctioned. Okay, this isn't gas company gouging you. It's an approved rate through the Department of Public Utilities, okay? So I started looking at the distribution charge, and I found out that of that $500 charge, $170 of that charge is a surcharge so that we can give credit to people who are converting to electricity.
Yeah, it's a subsidy.
I am subsidizing $170 of my
Thank you,
gas
Simon
bill.
Cataldo.
Okay? This is part of the Green New Deal, okay? So, it does two things. A, it provides a subsidy to people to do what they might otherwise not do without the subsidy. In other words, the market isn't telling people to go there. This is what the government wants, okay? And number two, it's making my gas bill high enough so that maybe I'll think about converting to electric. It's a two-pronged approach, and in my opinion, it is deliberate with malice aforethought, okay? They are trying to force us, and they're trying to drive us into doing something that we otherwise wouldn't do if only the market were determining the price point, which is what it should be. The government should not be interfering to the point. It's the same thing when they give you a subsidy on an electric vehicle. That should not be happening. If people want to buy electric cars, God bless them. Let them do it. But don't make me, the taxpayer, subsidize your purchase of an electric vehicle. Don't make me subsidize the use of electric heat and full electrification on your house by putting on a surcharge to my gas delivery charge, okay? That's what they're doing, all right? Channel 5 did an expose on it. They've gone back to the state. They went to the governor, and she says, oh, well, she said, I'm going to look into this. This is awful.
Yeah, right.
She knows all about it. She appointed two of the commissioners, of the DPW commissioners that okay the rate. She knows all about it. She's a left-wing person, and she's in favor of it. So please, Governor Healy, let's not pretend that you don't know what this is all about, because you do, all right? It's a scam. End
Well,
of
there's
rant.
right,
Bob,
well,
I won't say
Sounded
another,
good,
I won't say another thing for the rest of the
Well, that's not
It
true,
made me
but,
feel
okay.
good, buddy.
so one of the other things that I did come across was that they're going to allow the health insurance companies in this state to raise their deductibles.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that just means more out-of-pocket expenses. And currently, with what we're on, this will be interesting to see, is that if I have an MRI, or I have a CAT scan, or if I have any of those very expensive tests, which some of them I've been having for a long time because they monitor certain issues I have, Now I have to pay $250 deductible for each of those tests. If I'm-
What are you paying now?
That's what I'm saying. I'm paying $250 per.
Now?
Yes, MRI now. I don't know what it will be. And then as far as co-pays go, if you're out of network, it's $40. And it seems like everything is out of network. And 20 if you're in. And you have doctors that you've always had, and they are not in different networks. And so don't believe anything that you're hearing as far as the health costs go, because the state is doing that. Just like California
Evelyn,
allowed
let's just stop
the
using
insurance
government.
companies.
Simon Cataldo, what did he do about this?
About
Your
what?
guy is Simon Cataldo. Mm-hmm. My gal is Vanna Howard, who's a go with the flow, lockstep. Whatever the governor wants, she's going to get.
Excuse me.
She has no mind of her own. That's my personal opinion.
Right, and so when we take a look at the elected officials, since not everybody out there has the same representatives, okay, so rather than just say, we can single out all of them in the Merrimack Valley, we can put a list of them up there. You know, you contact your state rep and you tell them, and your state senators, and you say, hey, look, what the heck do you think you're doing here? You know, everything is a mess. The question would be, what hidden costs are there in some of our bills, not just utility, but we have other bills that are hidden costs that were supposed
do.
that were supposed to subsidize all the immigrants, illegal immigrants
Barge it
coming
in
in.
one more time. What are the 10 highest paid people at Yankee Doodle, wherever the name of the National Grid? What are the 10 highest salaries?
You can, I don't know, you can
I
look at all
understand,
of
but
them.
ask the governor that one too.
You can look at that for any of them.
And then go to
That's all
politics and see who gave to the governor's campaign.
Well, that's what's happening in Washington,
That's
D.C.
Channel 5's job, and Channel 5 doesn't want to do their job anymore.
Well, part of the reason they're not is because you've got too many Democrats that are out there that when they do their job, it makes them look bad. And so in Washington, D.C., I don't know.
Channel 5 fired all their Republicans. You know that, right?
No.
Over the last 10 years. They had 3 Republican people working for them, and they were terminated.
Yeah, so why is it a surprise when
Why
certain
did they fire
people...
them? Just because they're Republicans?
Yes.
Yeah, so why does it surprise
Wow.
everybody when you get a Republican in
I thought
office and they
Channel
get rid of
4
the
was
Democrats?
Democrat.
All they're doing is following along with everybody else. And pretty much, when you take a look at what past presidents have said about fraud and waste, this president is actually doing something about it, but everybody else ran on it and did nothing.
It's been a month. He had the job a month.
Yep, February
Can they,
20th.
can they give him about 6 months to see how things are?
Well, that's what he said on
It's crazy.
the interviews that he
Well,
had.
the traditional period is 100 days.
Okay.
They talk about.
We'll give him the 100 days. He's done a month
And,
so far.
you know, I'm sort of an amateur historian, so I'm looking at the Trump, what he's doing, and I'm comparing it to what Roosevelt did when he was elected in 1932 and was
The
trying.
first term.
And the first term, and was trying to address very serious economic condition, depression and so forth. And the Roosevelt administration, pretty much, I mean, it's amazing, you know, the similarity between what the Trump people are doing and what the Roosevelt people did. And Roosevelt brought in, the same thing as Trump, for all his cabinet people and the people he surrounded himself with, he brought in all these outsiders, people who were not entrenched politicians. A lot of them were economists and people from academia because they were trying to deal with an economic condition. All right, so that made some sense. But he brought in all these outsiders, and the first 100 days of the Roosevelt administration was the same thing. I mean, he's creating alphabet agencies and, you know, all kinds of things. And the Supreme Court, a lot of this stuff was litigated, and the Supreme Court struck down some of the Roosevelt initiatives that he was trying to enact to address really an economic crisis. And they asked Roosevelt about it, and they said, well, you know, you're going too fast, and some of the stuff you're doing is being judged as unconstitutional. And Roosevelt said, well, that's okay. He said, we've got a crisis going on. We have to do something. He said, and we'll try it. If it doesn't work, then we'll try something else. That was his answer, okay? So to me, when they hit Trump with the same thing, because he's going to be hit that way, he should say the same thing. He should say, look, trying to address a very terrible situation here. In fact, I heard Musk say it the other day. He said, we're going to make mistakes, right? So the answer is, we're going to make some mistakes.
And then we'll fix them fast.
And we'll fix them, and if the court says, you went too far, that's fine, we'll try something else. That's the answer. Now, I think just as an example, I'll pick one thing. The so-called birthright citizenship thing. There isn't any doubt in my mind that that's going to get up to the Supreme Court, and they're going to overturn it. Because, to me, it's blatantly unconstitutional. So I think they made a mistake there, but that's okay. So we'll go
wait a second.
We'll
now,
go off
Sam,
and do something else.
I'm confused now.
What?
Birthright citizenship in 2027 will it still be in place or no? In your mind? You said they're going to overturn it, so I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, they won't, I don't think they'll strike down the entire executive order, but the part of the executive order that essentially nullifies the provision in the Constitution that says if two people are in this country illegally and they have a child, the child gets automatic citizenship. That will be, and Trump says, no, that's not true. That part will be overturned.
No, Sam, I'm saying, from what you're repeating, wasting a lot of time here. In 2027,
Yep.
in your mind,
Yep.
if a husband and wife fly here from Saudi Arabia to have their child in Miami, will the child be an American citizen in 2027?
Yes.
In your mind?
Yes.
Thank you. Done.
You know what I'm hoping happens, and I think I see it locally, that a lot of times the Democrats right now, they're going to worry about the upcoming elections. And they're going to flip over to listen to Trump a little bit more. I think those numbers are going to climb. Even locally, I see it with Eric Gitchie. Couldn't get 2 votes. He couldn't even get a second to take his pay out of a line item because he don't get paid
That's
because
right.
he works at the Vogue.
Right.
Couldn't even get a second for that. But now I seen the meeting the other night that there's 4 people. It was over the pay raise extension for contract for the city manager. I think he had 4 votes. See, they're starting to say, oh boy, because it's an election coming up, not too long, November.
Tell us about that.
I wanted to still wait for Paul
okay,
Cohen.
all right. We'll
Because
wait, we'll wait.
Paul's name was mentioned between Eric Gitchie and Inside Lowell, Teddy Panos. And I'm not a fan of Inside Lowell or Teddy Panos, but I just want that to be clear.
Yep.
Eric was unbelievable for an hour. Teddy's very good at questioning. That's what he went to school for, working the radio and stuff. And he thought he was going to hammer Eric. He's for
I
it.
know him very well.
He was for the extension because he's a business owner downtown and he wants to get along with the city manager, and I don't blame him. That's what life's all about.
When is this contract up?
I'm not even sure. About 3 years. He had a 5-year
He's got an
deal.
evergreen contract now.
Well, he had a 5-year
So
deal anyways.
let me understand something. So
Yeah.
he's got a 5-year contract. He's got 3 years to go, and they're talking about an extension already?
Now he
Yeah,
has 6 years to go.
Oh, 6 years?
yeah.
Because
It
they
was
voted
just,
it in already.
Why would you talk about an extension when you still have 3 years or 4 years to go on your contract?
Sam, all I know is I wanted to say this to you badly today. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Inside Lowell, but I'd watch this. You have to watch Eric Gitchie on Inside Lowell.
I like Eric.
You would love
Yeah,
this show.
I like Eric.
It was unbelievable.
He's
It's a whole hour, non-stop. Non-stop.
All I saw was he asked him one question. That was the end of it.
Oh, yeah, well, to me, it was unbelievable.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Because it was on Facebook, a little snippet. And I said,
Yeah, and when, Mike, I can spill the guts right now, the way they brought up Paul Cohen was, if you don't sign our city manager to a new contract, you're going to get someone new that's just going to come in and get the same amount of money. And I'm pretty sure it was Eric that said, well, I think it's happened before that. That's not true. What do you mean? Well, it was Paul Cohen. Came in at a lower rate. And look at who you got. You got a great town manager.
Bernie
You
Lynch,
really
you
do. Come on, huh?
Bernie Lynch.
Oh, whatever, whoever it was. All I know is Paul Cohen.
It is true that, and I know this because I was on the select board that hired Paul, so I know exactly what happened
Well,
because
if
I
I'm
was
wrong,
there.
correct me.
No, you're not wrong. So Bernie left, and I don't remember what the numbers were, it doesn't matter, but we were paying him whatever we were paying him. And Paul came in at a substantially lower number than what we were paying Bernie. Substantially lower.
What was the reasoning behind that?
experience. I mean, Paul
thought.
was at the time 42 years old, and he had experience, but it was in much smaller.
Eric is
Towns.
watching. Eric is watching. He
Yeah.
says
I knew
he
he'd
has
be
2
watching.
years and 2 months left
Okay.
of April of 2027.
So to me, that, and Eric can.
Thank you, Eric.
Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, I think talking about an extension at this point is a little bit premature, okay? I mean, why wouldn't you wait until 8 months out, okay?
Well, that's how Eric
So the
feels.
question I
Yes.
have is Tommy's contract on a yearly basis, or that they review it? Or is it reviewed every time you come within 6 months of the end of the contract? What is the timeline of review for the contract? Because, Sam, you're familiar with the town manager, I'm familiar with the superintendent. And so, unless somebody brings something up because of whatever reasons, it's usually at the superintendent's request, please review my contract, it's coming up. It could be any number of reasons why you're reviewing the contract.
But they don't have to.
They could have found another job, they want to see if that you guys are going to do any better, they're not letting you know that, their name is out there, sometimes you find out after the fact, sometimes you
Who's
find
looking
out
to hire
before.
Tom Golden? Come on now.
I'm only
Come on.
using these things as
And
examples.
would you hire him to run your company?
I would have to interview him first to find out
Or
if he was
would you hire him to
qualified.
run your company?
Oh, I have friends that I'd hire. I know people that I'd want to have hired.
You hire
'cause
your
they-
friends? I
Well,
can't believe it.
I mean, a great business. Well, you know, the first thing I look at, Sam, would be where's their schooling, number one. And I have a friend that went to Central Catholic, went to Northeastern, come out in the top of his class, and he's a
Yeah.
great businessman. So that's who I would look
Of
for.
course, of
Just
course.
like Trump. That's who I looked for, a businessman. We
I
need a
wouldn't,
businessman.
I like Tom Golden. I mean,
I like him as a
I like him.
person.
He's a good guy. I would not hire him to run my private sector business because most of his background is in government, okay? So I'd want somebody that had actually run substantial businesses.
Yeah, see, and I sit
Yeah.
here week after week about schools. You know that. That's how I feel. And I think because of his mayor, they saved the schools. They saved our schools. Our schools were ready to crash. And right now, to me, this mayor has saved them, Danny Rourke, saved our schools. By,
he doing-
by hiring the right superintendent, that's all.
That's what-
The only
okay,
Because I
reason.
was wondering about how the
But that's what the
maintenance is.
school committee's supposed to do. They're supposed to hire the right people for the job.
Yeah,
right?
they wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for the mayor. The mayor came right in, I think it was his first day, second day with a motion to hire him when he was on the school committee.
Yep.
You know, he has to wear both hats, but just me personally, that's the most important thing in Lowell. And I learned that from Bill Topia, a guy that I really liked a lot. I think he was from Holyoke. He was a blow-in. I used to love to call him a blow-in. But he said, Bob, we have to save our schools. If we don't, we're in trouble.
Oh, you have to have good schools.
Yeah, so that
So
was
speaking
key.
of schools, how do you guys feel about what it is that Trump wants to do as far as getting rid of the Department of Education and putting more money and power and stuff into the state's hands?
How I feel?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Well,
I'm just, you
I-
just throw it
I
out
think
since we were
every-
talking about
all right,
education.
All right, I'd say every department needs to be looked at to see if there's any abuse and any waste. And look at just like the defense budget. I just seen this. It's, I hope I got it right. I think it's 8% a year they want cut out of that for 5 years. They just want to cut because they know there's that much fat in it. You know, every department, they're ready to get rid of what, 6,000 IRS employees now? Isn't that next? I think it's this week.
They're still ahead because they hired 87,000. So we're still, so if you get rid of 6, you're still up 81,000 versus where you were 4
Yeah,
years
did,
ago.
did they get to do
They don't
that?
tell you that part. do
I'm
they?
not sure. Did they
Hey,
get
guys,
to do
the
that?
texts are not transferring the way I want to transfer, so I had to I sent all the texts that got sent in to my text, and I can get my text instantly. So these are all copy and paste. So once again, government is lying to the public, and terrible and horrible local media are going right along with them. Next text, watching local news is a waste of time.
Yep.
All 9 stations say exactly the same thing. The same time in their newscast, Murray Healy is a dumpster fire. And why it's off to the right is I have to put it in, and then it sends it back to me. That's why it's repeated twice. He has 2 years left. This is from Eric earlier, Eric Gitchier. He has 2 years left on April of '27. Eric brought up a good point about the manager. What are his accomplishments since he took over the big chair? Well, there's a lot of secrecy that goes on. Nobody knows. Secrecy. Slide this up so you can see the rest of them. Come on, baby. Cooperate. Okay. If you look at a list of past city managers, you'll see that they are all puppets from the State House with the exception of Bernie Lynch. And the last one's from Eric Gitchier, and it says, as I said to Mr. Panos, stated no manager comes at a lower wage than the previous. Mr. Cohen came in at a much lower rate than Lynch was paid.
That is correct.
And when I was in the Greater Lowell Tech, we also hired a replacement superintendent for less than the previous superintendent. We both were amazing hires at less. Those are the techs right up to the minute, and when they catch up, I'll put them up quicker. Thanks.
Not only did Mr. Cohen come in at a lower rate, we redid a contract for him, and we eliminated some of the benefits that we had been paying Bernie. So he got a lower salary, and he got fewer perks. We took some perks out of his deal.
So we had the superintendent of schools in Chelmsford that we had when I was elected to the school committee. When he left, then we paid the next person whatever the going rate was, and there was a few other things in there. Then you learn. So that when you had the next guy come in after that guy, you cut out a certain amount of things in terms of vacation pay, accrued pay.
That's what we did. Yeah.
We don't have a car. He didn't have. I mean, whatever the telephone was, it was something very specific. Vacation time, you can't take it all up front. You have to be there, and that's what's accrued. Same thing with sick time. You don't get it all up front, so that if you left, you could take it all. And then you ended up with the current superintendent, and we negotiated that contract. But since I've left, most of the things that we got out of the contracts when we first started are back in there with that individual that we have there currently, and that's at the discretion of who the school committee members are. And I think that if you have somebody in a position that is doing an excellent job, you can add some of those perks back in. But each school committee member should realize that some of those things may need to go if you are having issues with your budget, because you should start at the top, and then you got to work with your unions to see what they can also give up. So there's a lot of little things that's out there that you hear about. You get rid of longevity, and then you have future school committees saying, "Oh, we really should have longevity." And I'm thinking, do you understand how much that costs in the future? So they need to understand what happens as a result, the cause and effect of what it is they're currently doing.
Well, this last bout about St. Tom, our city manager, Eric Gitchier brought up the point, I'll put myself on the camera over here. Eric Gitchier brought up the point that this is going to prompt all the unions who have 3 years left on their contract to say, hey, let's go to the table now.
Well, yes, that's exactly right.
Let's go get more contracts. And
He's right.
why wouldn't you?
That's what happens.
Yeah, pretty much that's
well,
the way
let me put that into context. So you were talking about Paul Cohen, and it's actually better to do this now than when he's here, because you don't want to embarrass the guy, because we're talking about his situation. But on several occasions, now you remember when Paul came to us, it was in December of 2006. Okay, and then we had a problem, we had a budget problem that he inherited, okay, that we worked through and he largely fixed. But in 2008, we got hit with a recession, and we got a lot of 9C cuts. So for a period of a few years, when the employee contracts came up, they had to really bargain hard with the unions to limit the amount of increase that the unions were going to take. And if I remember correctly, a couple of the unions took a zero increase, okay, in at least one of the contract years. I forget what the exact thing. But Paul Cohen led by example. Paul Cohen refused. His contract allowed him to get a salary increase year over year, and he refused it. He refused. There were 2 years where Mr. Cohen refused his salary increase. Okay, so he was trying to set an example. How many town managers or city managers would do that?
One,
Yeah, Paul Cohen.
that's it.
Yeah. So
Did Bernie refuse any of his raises?
I have no idea.
Well, wait, I
Oh,
got
you mean in
everything on my
Chelmsford?
chest,
Yeah.
I don't
No.
have to worry about city life show.
Well, there may be something else that we
Yeah.
discussed.
So, in fact, it got so bad that about 10 years ago, the Board of Selectmen, at the time was called Board of Selectmen, they had to actually make an adjustment in Paul's salary scale because he fell below the market, all right? And he was getting offers from other towns. Towns like Acton and Lexington were coming to Paul saying, please come and manage our town, all right? And the money was a lot better because we had fallen behind in Chelmsford. So they actually had to make an adjustment to his salary level because they didn't want him to go, all right? And but, again, lead by example, and it's very important. I know it's in some cases it's apples and oranges. I get it, but still, the optics of it are important. If you're going to tell your people that they can't get a salary increase and you're the manager, well, maybe you shouldn't take a salary increase either. Okay? I mean, I just think that makes sense. Okay?
Well, I think
And,
we're going to have quite
yeah.
a number of questions that we can certainly ask Paul as far as budget goes, and because you're on the Finance Committee, you'll have a lot.
I also interviewed him on my show last week, so I think I've heard his budget presentation at least 4 times. So
Well, I
I've-
understand that,
I've
but we
got it.
haven't done it here. Yeah,
I've
but
got
I'm
it.
just saying that you've got the background and the experience. That when we get going, we certainly ask the questions and have him do the talking as far as what actually is in there,
He-
since
he
I
will-
know that you could do it all.
He will paint a very bleak picture, I can tell you.
Well,
Hey,
that's
does one of
great.
you- Do one of you guys have an Xfinity phone?
Xfinity?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mine is
Which carrier?
Mine is Verizon.
Verizon.
No, mine's Comcast.
Because I got
Well, that's
a link coming
Xfinity.
up for an Xfinity phone. I want to talk to somebody. Because the only person I know that has an Xfinity phone says when I text them, they don't get the text like,
Isn't
a long time.
Comcast
Oh, no,
Xfinity?
I thought so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't have a problem getting texts.
past, that doesn't have it. I just saw, I wanted to ask, but none of you
So I
have
have,
an Xfinity phone, so. we're good.
well, I have an account with Xfinity.
I do too. We're on Xfinity,
Yeah, I don't have Verizon.
Comcast.
So if I want to go someplace, I have to go to an Xfinity store in order to get what I need.
Very confusing when they change these names.
Well, that's just the way business is. So one of the things on my list was to talk about not the speed at which, because we've talked about the speed at which the President of the United States is currently doing business, because it figures you get as much out there, yeah, as fast as
yeah.
possible. But also, in terms of the Democratic response. Now, that seems to be a topic of discussion everywhere. Podcasts, whether they're conservative or liberal, local media, national news. There's a whole lot of things going on. I'm sure that John is listening to BBC and Al Jazeera and whatever it is as far as what's going on in this country and their perspective on it. But I don't understand, well, I don't understand people's mentality, but if I will say this about people who are not listening to a wider range of viewpoints, is that if you have the more liberal media telling you certain things and it's inciting you and making you angry, you should do a little bit more research, because there was a video that was out there on what the salary was for like Clinton and Obama and Trump. And then what they did was they added all the extra stuff only on Trump. Oh, it cost this much money to decorate the White House, and he's spending that money, and he's spending this money for something else, and his travel is costing this, and the Secret Service is costing that. Well, they should really, if they're going to be fair and open with everybody and honest with everybody, is to put down the expenses of each of the presidents in the different categories. But that doesn't benefit their
they're not-
narrative.
They're not interested in that.
But the media did say that the Super Bowl trip Trump paid for personally.
He also doesn't take a salary. You know that, right?
He's not taking a salary.
He's not taking a salary,
It's going
no.
to his library, I think.
And the other thing is that, and people don't know this, and it doesn't matter who the president is, and this goes all the way back to the beginning. The president, he lives in the White House, but the president pays for his own household expenses, okay? So the government doesn't do that. So whoever the president is, they have to pay their own, like if he has a, if the first lady has a maid, for example, she has to pay
Who's
for
paying
that.
for the Rice Krispies in the bowl?
The president.
Okay.
Okay, they pay for their own food, and they pay for the staff's food. People don't know that. So, I'm not sure that's right, but that's the way it is, okay?
Okay, so I'm gonna blow through these texts
Yeah.
quick. And the reason they repeat it is because the texts aren't coming through, so I have to do it a little weird, but that's okay. Government is not for the people. They never, they never have and never will. Wake up, people. The only reason they build big city halls and big town halls is so they can fill up the rooms with made-up jobs. Oh, God. And then the last one, Mr. Cohen is being praised and chastised by other public employees for not taking a pay hike. Those are all, I got more coming in, but I'll go back to that in a little bit. Thanks.
I don't think the public employees are saying one thing or another. You
No,
know,
because they want to keep their jobs, so
they don't care.
Locally,
Yeah,
anyway,
they don't
generally
care.
speaking. But there's an awful lot of stuff that's happening at the national level
Mm-hmm.
with regard to one party versus another party. And so to continue along that thread of what Democrats are basically doing is, screaming and yelling and they're out there and they're protesting, but they're protesting based upon the information that they're being fed. So when they start to accuse the current administration of either being a Nazi or a fascist or whatever the thing is, in order to incite the electorate, the Democrats are doing what they're accusing the current administration of.
It's called projection.
And it's really, it's sad to see, but should not be surprising based upon the way public school education is for people not to be thinking on their own, but being told what to think, because it's the lazy man's way of doing business. And a lot of this stuff I'm throwing out to see what kind of reactions I'm going to get out there.
When I hear you say that, right off the bat, I hear Trump say he wants to send the schools, education back to the states, okay?
Yep.
I live in Massachusetts. If the news is right that I hear, Massachusetts does pretty well in our public schools. We rank in the top 10 all the time, I believe. And if that's true, why not have it back here? You know what it is? The Democratic side of things will say, well, the poor people in Mississippi or the poor people here. See, I'm starting to think, take care of home. And I think the first time I've ever heard any president talk about homelessness is coming from Trump.
Well, there's a lot of issues, but in
yeah,
terms of
but-
education, there was something that he said, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, and he said, I wanted things to go back to the states. We're ranked like 40th out of 40 in the world globally. And then he started to talk about the Scandinavian countries. And what Chelmsford had done 2 superintendents ago, had sent the superintendent to some kind of a function in Finland, because we were talking about, I think it was Finland's educational system and how wonderful everything is, except that you can't do it in this country. And if you did, you'd definitely have an uprising because of how they do some of their education.
It's not, the European system and the American system, it's apples and oranges.
Well-
Not even close to being comparable.
Right, but what they had done in that particular country was when you graduated from your secondary school education and you're going to go on to higher education, college education, or skill-based training, or whatever it might be that you call it, they allow you to pick a major in something that they need you to get a job in.
Right.
So you can't get it in bartending, and you can't
Right.
get it in how I pick weeds. You have to get it in something that you will have a job afterwards. And that eliminates a lot of freedom of choice, which we have in this country, that you can choose whatever you want.
And to a lesser degree, I think it's, and I remember that. I remember when you guys went through that.
Right.
I think that's also true to a lesser degree in the other Western European countries. Germany, for example, I don't think it's quite as strict maybe as Finland, but it's the same idea. They program the kids to go in a certain direction that the government says we need these positions.
Right, so then their
it's-
unemployment rates are a lot lower because they're directing them
Well,
into the jobs.
They also can't fire people, all right? So once, and I spent a lot of my earlier years doing international business and finance and distribution and so forth. And I got very, very close to some folks overseas. And I remember talking to our Netherlands guy, and he says, once a company hires somebody over here, they own them because you can't fire them. He said the only upside is it's harder to get hired, okay? Because when a company is hiring somebody, they understand that if they bring him on, that's it, okay? They own them. So they try to make as certain as they can that this person is going to be a good play. But it's these comparisons between the American system and the European system, it's useful. You get some information out of it, but it's not comparable, okay? Our education system is completely different. Our focus is completely different here. We try to educate more students at a base level than they do in England, France, Germany, Finland, Denmark, and so forth. Their systems are more elitist, okay? They separate kids out, like Evelyn says, and they push them in different directions. It's not the same system.
Plus with special
okay?
education.
The one thing I remember about Finland, though, is
Exactly.
they look for the top teachers and they pay top money.
Oh, the teaching, yeah.
Yeah, top money.
And that's pretty true of the other European countries too. And the teaching profession is generally held in higher regard in those countries. Teachers, I think, are more respected in some of those countries as well, because the educational product is more valued. But
You know how Ned Tommy has things that irk him? When we compare Lowell to Chelmsford, the first thing that comes to my mind is, and these are approximate numbers, don't forget Lowell's got 70 different languages in the school.
it's not the same thing.
Malden's got 85 different languages in their school. Boston's got over 100 different languages.
No.
No, but what happened,
The United States should have one language. If we have, like Rome, if you don't speak Latin, don't go. You can't go anywhere in the church if you don't speak Latin.
right, but you have to be able to communicate with the people
Right.
that are in the classroom. And in order to do so, the teacher has to have some understanding of some of their languages. So there are better ways today, because you
let me
have
change the
this,
qu- let me
to
change
be
the
able
issue.
to communicate with them. But in the meantime, what's happening, John, is that the kids are learning English, but they have to learn it someplace. They can't just arbitrarily say, you can't come to our school system because you can't speak English.
Present the issue in a different fashion. Starting with Sam. Do you think we should have an official language, and what language should it be, Sam? The United States of America.
I don't think we should have a legal official language, but
Okay.
the language is English. It's English.
No, but it's not. Bob, what do you think?
English. I think we should all speak English.
So that should be the law, or just if we feel like it?
No, I think it should be law. Should be law.
Evelyn, what do you think?
I agree with Bob. But one of the things to realize is you have other languages. And unless you teach those people how to speak English, you got to communicate somehow with them on different levels. But one comment I wanted to
Do you
make that I
think in
didn't.
Spain they do this?
Doesn't matter. This is America.
I'm
and
just
we're
asking, do
we're
you think
here.
in Spain they do it? Do you think they do that in Italy?
Yeah, but we're not those countries.
I'm
And we
just
don't
asking
have
the
all their
question.
issues.
Just asking the question.
We have different issues there, and every country has the right to do whatever it is they want. They want to follow another country,
Right.
that's up to them.
Okay, well,
Right
I'll tell
now,
you
we're
why- I'll
not.
tell you why the Russian Navy cannot defend itself. The Russian Navy cannot defend itself because all languages are allowed on the boat. So there you go, like, you're on the lookout and you only speak Swahili. I see a submarine out there. So you say over in Swahili, I see a submarine. The captain says, what the hell is he talking about? I don't know. When you listen to, and the best example of this is to, I listen to a lot of crazy stuff. I listen to broadcasts of towers at airports talking to planes on the ground coming in, where they're going to park, where they're going to go. And I listened to one from Air China. Air China hears what they want to hear. Air China 329, hold where you are, hold your position. Air China, proceed to gate. That's what the guy repeats back. Air China, stop where you are. Hold, hold, hold. Air China, proceed to gate.
Oh. Look at that.
I'll be right there, Paul, thanks.
Right on time.
I'll be right there, thanks. Okay. I gotta go get Paul.
Well, that's okay, so we can continue this
That's why I
later.
think we should have an official line.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, but the point I wanted to make when we were talking about the different Scandinavian countries, because that's what Trump had said, the first thing that comes to mind is, pre-COVID, if Massachusetts was its own country, would be number one, because of the scores and the different things that was going on within this state. And it is compared,
So
even though we
we're
are
ahead-
liberal.
We're ahead of the European countries, Mass is?
In certain areas
Okay.
of the common tests that we took,
All
not
right.
currently, but when
Pre-COVID.
pre-COVID.
Okay.
Okay, we were doing that, and I smiled to myself when he made that comment, which if he had been given fed the appropriate data, he would have used that as an example, in that, we want to be able to compete globally, but we want to make sure our money
Well-
is going, appropriately and being used for what it was intended.
Let's get back to the core issue. We're talking about education and potentially dismantling the Department of Education. But what the focus is, it's on federalism, okay? And this is what people don't understand. We have a federal system, we have 50 states, okay? And when the country was originally constructed, the idea was that the power would reside locally as much as possible. And go back and read the 10th Amendment of the Federal Constitution, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so the idea at the time was that the federal government was not supposed to be the be-all and the end-all and the bestower of benefits, okay? Things were supposed to be left as much as possible at the local level. And the states were supposed to have most of the jurisdictional authority over people's lives, okay, from a legal standpoint.
Right, I was letting him finish his
Okay.
thought, that's all.
Yes, and so what you're hearing out of the administration is, we'd like to get back to a more federal system where we push things back to the states and let the states do what the states are supposed to do, okay?
So
So
anyway,
you can agree or disagree with that. I'm just trying to provide some historical context as to why they're doing what they're doing, okay? They're trying to get away from somebody sitting in Washington making all the decisions for everybody in the country. That's the idea.
I tricked you to
Right
this.
or
You're
wrong?
staying right there,
Paul,
buddy.
This is the government guy. He knows. Wait, where do you want me to sit?
I was
Right
gonna
where
have
you
to go
are,
behind
buddy,
Oh, wait a
right where
minute,
you
I'm
are.
supposed to be on the end.
No, you lost it. I moved quicker than you, Sam.
Yeah, go get some coffee. Anyway, we're back. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Good morning, good to
Yeah.
be here.
We
How
only
was your
spent,
weather when you left this morning?
Cold.
we only spent about 20 minutes talking about you.
Oh, all right.
All in a good way, though.
Talk about Paul before he
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was all good.
Okay.
Has temperature gone up any?
No. It's still dropping. Single digits, yeah.
9 degrees.
So you have farm animals.
Ooh.
So what
Yeah.
kind of animals do you have?
The ones that are outside would be horses, yeah.
Right, but
Yeah.
what do you have inside? I mean, not
Yeah, we have
not
dogs, cats,
Yeah, I got that.
chickens.
You got chickens.
Chickens.
Chickens
I didn't know
aren't-
you had chickens.
But they're not in your house. They're in a barn or they're in
Yeah,
a chicken
yeah,
coop.
Yeah, but I meant like what's really exposed to the weather would be the horses, but yeah,
Right, but you also have things that's like in a barn.
yes.
So do you have any more than chickens in a barn and a horse?
No,
Okay.
We have rabbits, but those are more inside, yeah.
Right, but those are inside the building.
What do the rabbits do?
Not much.
Okay, I was gonna say, I mean, I understand why you'd have chickens.
Chicken for the eggs at $4 a dozen.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell
You
you.
can rent your
They're very
chickens out right
valuable
now
now.
for a side gig, yeah.
Very valuable.
Right, but it's key that your chickens are inside.
Yes,
I
yeah.
hope so.
Because, well, it isn't just that. When I was
Frozen
reading
eggs.
several articles about avian bird flu, it seems as though if you have chickens outside and you have wild birds flying over and all kinds of stuff, that's how they're getting the flu. If you have your chickens in a coop or they're under cover and and the birds aren't getting, wild birds aren't
Yeah.
getting caught, your birds are fine. And so I thought that was kind of ironic in that you have all these people that want everything organic and everything free.
Free range,
Yeah,
yeah.
and unfortunately, it's the demise of the birds when you go in that direction.
Do you have any flyers in your chickens?
No, nothing
Okay.
that serious, no.
Yeah.
No, we have some roosters, but not flyers.
We have more texts?
Sam, if you can read these.
Which, do you want me to read them all? Where do you want me to start?
The bottom two, right here.
Oh, just the bottom two. Listen to how the media portrayed Trump compared to a guy who clearly had a mind issue, meaning Biden, I guess.
Right.
And then, if I can see the blue, the parents have
No,
to
no,
be...
no, you read
Oh,
on
you
the
don't
left
want me,
side.
okay. The parents have to be accountable for some of the reading problems that kids have nowadays. Jay.
I got one more.
Most foreigners who come to America can speak multiple languages, including English. Most Americans can only speak English. There is some truth to that.
Well, there's a lot of truth to it,
Yeah.
not just some.
That's all the text for this hour.
So, Paul,
Yeah.
when we were talking about you on the Dawn Patrol, it was about the issue of the city manager getting an extension on his contract in Lowell, and Eric Gitcher was on Inside Lowell, and it went on for about an hour, and your name was mentioned, and I paid attention when they brought your name up, because the leader of Inside, Teddy Panos there, he said, no city manager is ever going to come in, or town manager is going to come in at a lower price. And Eric just said, no, well, Paul Cohen did. And
Yes, he did.
that just said, yeah, and that just set everything off. But I just want to see a response on this, just so you
What did that
know.
have to do with an extension? I mean, coming in at a lower price is different.
Yeah, well, why not lock him in for another 3 years now?
Why? Because it'd be more expensive to bring somebody else in?
Yeah,
No,
I
that's
don't,
nonsense.
I didn't catch the point
Yeah,
myself.
Yeah, I don't believe that to
But
be
let
the
me-
case. And nothing against Tom, I just don't
Right.
believe that's the case. You know, the market is what the market is. And if you're paying your current manager under market, there's a problem. And, yeah, but it should, yeah, I think that's a different issue than, the pay level is a different issue than the contract extension.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if Chelmsford has this issue like we do in Lowell about the all that ARPA money we had. And they hired some permanent people, like upwards of.
We didn't do that. No, we did not hire any permanent people with the ARPA money because we knew the ARPA money was limited and then it was going to end, which meant that you'd have to have a problem budgetarily trying to retain those people. So we did not spend a penny on permanent employees.
And how about DEI? That's the last thing. I
No,
said.
no, we did, no.
Not-
I
not
mean,
in
we've
Chelmsford?
always been, not for DEI's sake. I mean, we look for, obviously a diverse employment base, but no, we did not hire anybody on the basis of anything other than their qualifications.
Okay, thanks.
Does the town have a policy on DEI? I know we have a committee.
Yeah, we have a committee.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, we have a policy on, you basically, what DEI should be and what it is being representative of the community. So if you're appointing a committee or you're hiring somebody and all other things are equal, you would take the person who would bring more diversity because you're trying to reflect the committee
Exactly.
in your community, whether it's your employment base or your committee base. So it's a simple thing. People make it more complicated than what it needs to
Exactly.
be. But that's what it is, and so therefore, if you're a child going to school, DEI should be you should have male teachers. Why? Because half your population is male. Therefore, if you're sitting with two candidates in a room and you have a male and a female, we know the teaching profession is predominantly female. Then we would hire the male candidate if all other things are equal. But if you're one of the science teacher, and the two candidates were there, and the male one didn't know anything about science, but the female one was excellent in science, you don't hire the male one just for the sake of having the male teacher, because that's basically working against the goals of what you're trying to fulfill, meaning educating students.
Right, well, you're looking at the higher purpose versus
Or
the
even
political
or even a
purpose.
committee, or even a board or committee.
Right.
You know, if you're appointing a committee for, you know, whatever, you know, in the community, let's say you're appointing, you know, the planning board, then yeah, all things being equal, you would favor somebody that, therefore you'd want in an ideal situation reflective of the community, meaning different genders, different nationalities, different perspectives, different life experiences.
And even different, living in different parts of the town.
Live in different parts of
Right.
the town, and also different backgrounds. In other words, if you had six engineers on the planning board, and the person came in who was a historian versus another engineer, then hire the historian, just for the sake of having a diversity a difference of, and a mix of opinions and perspectives. It's,
A lot of
you know,
people don't
make it
look
too-
at-
They make it too complicated.
Right, and they don't look at diversity as having a different opinion. They look at it in terms of your ethnic background,
Right.
which is unfortunate. If it was just different opinions, I think that most people would say, yeah, that's logical, that makes a whole lot of sense. But generally speaking, that's not the way that it has been portrayed. It's all political. We had that special town meeting with changing the bylaw for,
Accessory apartments. Yeah.
yep, the accessory dwellings units.
Yep.
And have you had any feedback on the results of that?
The initial feedback is we have had a few applications, and what we're finding is, no surprise, there were some illegal conversions that people didn't know about. So we're finding work that was done without proper permits. And that's okay, because we'll handle it like an adult, and reflect the realities. So yes, we're finding basically, like most things, people.
The assessor will be out to see.
Right, the assessor will be out to see you, and people were basically doing things contrary to the, you know, the technical or real legal requirements of the law, but that's not a surprise. I mean, people knew, you know, that people were doing illegal conversions, or that people who had lawful, accessory in-law apartments were often renting them to non-in-laws. I mean,
Correct.
that's, you just, it's like anything else, right? You just deal with the reality. Gambling, you can't be shocked that there's gambling going on.
We have
Yeah.
about 9,500 single-family homes in Chelmsford, so as a percentage, it's very, very low, but we have that high number would indicate that you're going to have some
Right.
fallout.
And the idea of the special town meeting, going to your point, was we wanted to have standards in place when the law became effective that were in compliance with the state regulations were sort of coming out in real time. And so that's really why we did it, because otherwise it would have been
We had a deadline, didn't we?
It was a deadline, but,
Yeah.
and if you didn't pass the law, you still had to comply with the state law, but then it would have been confusing for both the residents and the building department, like, well, does this meet the standard? Is this in conformance with the law? So we adopted the zoning, so that way it provided, clear guidance. And, like I said, so far, so good.
Well, I noticed at the time, and if anybody has joined us, we're City Life. I'm Evelyn Thoren, your host, up until just before 8 o'clock this morning, and my co-hosts Sam Chase and Bob Hoey, and we have Chelmsford Town Manager Paul Cohen. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please make sure that you can text 978-808-8200. You can also call in if you'd like to make any comments about anything or ask questions verbally versus having a text. We try to read all of the text that's out there so that we can respond to them or not respond to them, as the case may be.
My glass.
When do we get to John's announcements? What time's that?
7:20.
7:20.
All right,
Oh, I hate it. But yeah, but it's, the only election season pretty much is ours, and I think Drake is in the spring.
Tewksbury has contested elections this spring. Yep.
Right. We don't have that many in terms of our contested elections, which
no.
you have now two brand new people
Selectmen is
on.
uncontested.
Right.
Yep, you had 3 positions, so you have 2 new people. Have those individuals met with you and talked to you about what their
Yes.
views
yes,
are?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I've sat down with Aaron Cunningham and spent some time with Jeff Hardy. So yes.
Good.
And then so we're
Good.
And obviously I've known them prior to the election season in the capacity either on the parade committee or the strategic plan committee in the case of Aaron. So, yeah, so I know them. It is a bit unusual to have two new people coming on board uncontested. And obviously a 40% change in the 5-member makeup of the board is
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, they're going to go fine. I mean,
Usually it does.
Yeah.
Regardless of what their views are, things just keep moving along.
And Jeff is filling out George Dixon's term, which has, George will resign effective, what, April 1st?
April 1st.
April 1st, and then 2 years to go in his term, and Jeff will finish out the 2-year term.
I recently did a polar plunge a couple of weeks back, and I missed the Jay Lang show that they had, Sam and Evelyn had, and I remember him telling me a few years ago that 2025 is going to be a tough year, money-wise.
Yep.
Budgets.
Yep.
Cuts,
He
things
was
like
right.
that.
He was,
Well, no,
because we've been
I
talking
mean-
about it for a year.
no, but I know, but I think it was like 2 years ago he was telling me that. He says, things will be good this
Well,
year.
really, you
but
have been talking about it for 2 years.
Watch out for 2025, and here we are, it's like, it's kind of scary.
Well, the
What's-
problem is the inflation has been very challenging because in our case, 3/4 of our revenue base comes from the property tax, and that's constrained by 2.5%. And when you have inflation running, in some cases, 7% 1 year or 20% in 5 years and so forth, the math doesn't add up. And there was a story the other day that the state budget has grown by 50% in 7 years. And so the state budget has grown because they're not constrained by a regulator.
Outrageous.
By Proposition 2.5. And I think what upsets cities and towns is the level of state aid and state support hasn't grown equivalent to the growth in the state budget. So we've kind of are hurting at the local level because of the fact of our revenue base can't compete with inflation, and the state hasn't sort of backfilled us. And I think that's the story in a nutshell. And what's really hurting us this year is benefits and insurance. Our health insurance premiums went up by 17.77%, and our retirement assessments going up by 8.4%. So basically, 70% of our revenue, new available revenue, is going towards health insurance and benefit costs without even putting a penny towards the labor costs. And the challenge on the labor cost is with the labor shortage and the employees, and with inflation, employees are not taking a discount. And we're seeing movement of employees to follow money. And so you're having to settle contracts and pay people above the rate of inflation or above your 2.5% growth in the property tax revenue. So that causes the local crisis. And it is a crisis. I mean, we're going into the upcoming budget year with fewer positions. We laid off 3 people at the town offices 2 weeks ago. And, we have more positions that aren't being filled.
Plus you
we
didn't
we
fill
didn't
positions
fill
that
on
have
the
been
way.
vacant for a year or two.
Exactly, because,
Right.
so there were, it's a case now where we demonstrated that, we're at equivalent employment levels in the general government side that we were 20 years ago. And the town has grown in 20 years by population and the complexity of services.
Let me ask you a question. So you talked about the salary levels and so forth and inflation. So relative to other towns around us, where do we stand in terms of salary levels for our employees? Are we at the average? Are we below? Because my perception is that we've lost people to other towns,
Yep.
and I would assume that's because they can get more money in other towns. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and they generally get more money in what I call the wealthier towns. So in other words, we would lose we have lost a police officer to Concord and to Bedford because those towns can pay more because they can go to the voters and get an increase in the property tax overrides.
Right.
So that's where we lose them to, compared to what we call the comparable towns of the Billrickas, the Tewksburys, the Draycotts. I would say we always slot in around number 2.
So
we
okay.
basically pay. Billrica is the wealthiest town in when I say wealthy, meaning
They get more state aid.
They have more commercial tax base,
Right.
And they get more state aid, and they're a larger population, so they generally tend to employ them, and pay the most. We tend to come in a second. We're slightly above Tewksbury, and then Draycott is tends to lag behind because again, Draycott doesn't have the commercial tax base. and can't get the overrides as well.
Right.
I thought Burlington was the big.
Oh, yeah, but we don't consider, we're in a different league than Burlington.
Not even close.
Burlington has, 50% commercial, yeah, because Burlington has such a commercial tax base.
45% of Burlington's real estate is in commercial.
Exactly, and they're just
it's big.
It's wealthy. Because they're right, because they're right at the location of 128 and Route
It's-
3.
And, well,
they're
they
rolling it.
also planned their zoning over a 35-year period. I mean, this didn't happen by accident. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the location is the paramount thing. But the people in Burlington pursued a deliberate zoning strategy in order to get the types of commercial development that they have localized where it is. So when you have 45% of your real estate in commercial, that is a tremendous benefit to the residential homeowner in terms of a property tax. And also, if you're going to do a split, which they do in Burlington, if you're going to do a split, when you have 45% commercial, it doesn't affect the commercial tax base as much. So they don't mind paying more taxes
Yes.
as much as they would in a different town.
And it's high-quality commercial, too. It's
Exactly,
grade A
grade A office
commercial
space, and
exactly.
exactly.
Which-
So
yeah.
they did it right, but you're right. I mean, they are
Location,
fortunate
Location, yeah.
because of their location, right?
And that's why I think 129 off of Route 3, Chelmsford, is going to be an attractive place.
But it's not,
No?
it's not as attractive as, say, Burlington is in
Right.
terms of location.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Burlington's also closer to Boston.
Right, the closer you move
Right.
down Route 3, the better off you are.
Yeah.
That's why Billerica's better than we are, and then Bedford and then
So we do have some commercial development going on 129. Now, if you drive down there, you'll see that some buildings
Yeah.
have been taken down, and
Yeah, office
What's-
buildings being taken down. but
what's
that's
that
more-
all about? Mm-hmm.
More for like distribution centers, and, which is what the demolition is on Bedford, Billerica Road near the highway. And as you may know, I have a zoning proposal in
Mm-hmm.
that would basically to allow retail, fast food retail on the parcel adjacent to the highway, because we've been trying now for 9 years, since we passed the bylaw, to bring in amenities, and we have one place, which is Press Cafe, which does remarkably well. But despite their success, no one else has come in.
correct.
And so a property owner can step forward and says they would demo their building and put in 2 drive-through restaurants. And so I brought that forward, bringing that forward to town meeting, probably over the opposition of the planning board and.
Yeah, they weren't
and
too
some
happy about
others,
it.
Which is unfortunate, because again, I think people need to, one, look at what the market's telling you, and 2, step back and look at what the reality is. This is not the demise of anything. This is literally a business parcel right at the edge of the highway that is basically surrounded by off-ramp, and therefore it is a unique parcel, but it will fulfill, I think it'd be welcomed by, not only those who would jump off the highway real quick to utilize the service, but those in the business corridor who would welcome the amenity to have a coffee shop like a Starbucks, in addition to Press Cafe, or quick fast food such as a well designed and exterior appearance McDonald's restaurant type.
So are those the particular drive-throughs that are being entertained?
And the reason for that is because, again, it's about the market. If somebody's going to incur the expense of demoing a building and constructing a new facility, you have to have a long-term lease and a tenant to get your financing, and those are the quality tenants. If you're going to the bank and saying, I want this, and they're going to say, well, who are your tenants? You can't say, oh, it's a plaza, and we're going to lease it out, hopefully.
They'll never loan you- yeah.
Joe's Enchiladas will hopefully be successful there. It's not going to work. It's
They
going to
don't
be.
loan money on speculation.
Right, they're
They won't do it.
How did that ever happen?
He gave me his mic.
That's a first.
And some of them don't
That's a
work.
first.
Yeah.
Sam, re-ask this question so the audience knows. Is this why I see they usually leave one wall up? When I see the.
Oh, that's for zoning. That's for zoning. That's usually with the zoning issue.
Repeat the question, Sam, so people know what I'm talking about.
What question?
About do they leave a wall up to have the pre-existing non-conforming use? In this case, it's full demo, so no, there wouldn't be
Yes.
a wall up. It would.
No.
It would be a zoning
Is that
change.
why I see the
Yes,
wall
that's
up?
why they
Yes.
do that for pre-existing non-conforming. They'll leave a wall up because it's a modification as opposed to entirely new construction.
It's what you call a loophole,
Loophole,
John.
yeah.
Well, they also do that with historical buildings, too,
Yes.
is if you can keep the original foundation, this is historic, and it's not just in Chelmsford. You keep the foundation or a piece of the foundation, then you build on that, no matter how big or extensive the thing is.
The foundation doesn't count, you gotta leave a wall up.
Right.
Well, the foundation, isn't that a part of a wall? Or is there a different definition of a
You
wall?
gotta leave wall up. The foundation's not good enough, that's my
Oh.
understanding, but I'm just asking the question.
So with the possibility of having drive-throughs, what you just explained was it doesn't impact any residents.
Right, right. It's not in a residential neighborhood, and there will not be any significant traffic impact to the adjoining residential neighborhood.
Yeah, if you put a McDonald's there, I'd probably go there than Drum Hill. Because the amount of congestion at Drum Hill, the number of lights.
Yep.
And all of the other stuff that's there, plus there's if they build it big enough, you'll be able to have more people in a line. Where when you're at Drum Hill, they have double, but the problem is that sometimes it kind of creeps out onto the regular road.
It's also on the other side of the little connector that shouldn't be overlooked. You're on the Burlington side of the little connector at the 129 off-ramp. And if you think about it, going down that way towards 128,
There's nothing else.
There's nothing else, exactly. That's why it'll be successful.
And I think that's why they had proposed that further north, too, when you were trying to get a different type of a rest area that was
Yep.
going to be
Yep.
just up beyond Route 40.
Yeah, Route 40, yep,
And
exactly.
that didn't happen either.
Nope.
Because of other impacts and
neighborhood
oppositions.
opposition, yeah.
Yes, but there shouldn't be any neighborhood opposition to the one at 129.
Oh, there will
because
be.
it
Yeah, we know there'll be
You'll-
certain
you'll
residents
always
from
get neighborhood
opposition.
And you'll
we're
have-
not going
you'll
to name
have-
names as to who's going to do this, since I have a couple of people in my head.
Like
Yeah.
a former president might have said, it depends on what the word neighbor means, okay?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to have opposition, all right.
You know, Paul, we recently,
Sorry, kids, very important
Yeah.
show.
Oh, you're going to eat that one? Ah.
Priority, what is it?
Okay, well, that one was one I tried to make that was healthy, with
forget it.
oatmeal and blueberries. And when I tasted it, I didn't like it, so I put dark chocolate and coconut on it to see if it would taste better. So you can tell me if you like that. And I made them little because like a bite. The other thing that I have that you didn't show is that I made,
Maybe I'll do a second.
okay, all right.
Paul, so I believe, maybe where you live, you might not miss this storm, but I believe we're going to miss the snowstorm that's supposed to come today.
Oh, yeah, it's only going to hit the Cape.
I hope so.
Yeah, it's only going to
Yeah,
hit the
so-
Cape, yeah, no snow.
How you doing with a snow budget in
We're
Chelmsford?
nearing the end of the $1 million that we appropriated for snow and ice, because it's not so much the plowing, it's been the ice treatment, basically road salt, and just the frequency of storms, particularly, we've gone basically 4 weekends in a row of snow and ice removal in terms of everybody being out there.
Ex-roofer. I call it the perfect storm.
Exactly.
Lot of issues with flat roofs.
Yep.
The streets, potholes, everything's happening.
Oh, the ice is unbelievable.
The ice, yeah, because it hasn't warmed up. I mean, this is probably the worst winter we've had in about 10 years.
Well, when we had the storm over last weekend, I had to be back because I had to take care of my son's pets. And Glenn stayed at the lake because he knew that there was going to be snow up there, because we're taking it off roofs and trying to, different things at that location. And of course, then we get the snowstorm. So I said to him, I haven't used the snow blower in a long time. Can you walk me through it? So I'm looking at it going, I think I've done this before, but it was before I had my shoulders replaced.
Okay.
So I actually got out there and I did the snow blower, which I really liked. And you did it earlier in the storm because you knew it was going to
Yes.
get wet later.
Yep.
But the biggest issue I had was trying to blow out my son's driveway. My brother-in-law showed up because my sister-in-law was not happy with having me out there snow blowing. But the drains.
Kubota.
Yeah.
I don't
tractor.
have, no, because I don't have snow tires on it. And so,
You could have
no,
chains.
no, it's not heated.
Chains would have worked.
It's gonna change, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, eat up my grass.
Boy, that's-
Anyway, I didn't have any problems using the snow blower. It was deja vu moment for me because every time when the kids were little and Glenn would travel, we always had snow in the wintertime, so I
course.
had to blow everything out. And
Right.
so I was impressed with the fact that I still could do that, even in spite of how old I am.
And it didn't have an electric start, so you were.
It did.
It did,
Because
okay,
I
well, there
can't,
you
I
go.
can't pull it.
There you go, all right. you're all
Very
set.
easily. So electric start,
Okay.
no issues, and that, and of course, we keep all of the gasoline in one of our sheds,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to shovel out to get to the shed.
Yeah.
Among other things that had to happen at the time. But there's 2 drains across the street, and so I tried to make sure that
Gotta
the
clean
drains
those
were
out.
clear,
Right.
because it was about 6 inches of water by the time I actually got over there, because I was soaking wet by the time I got back in the house. I was very happy it went to 36 degrees, and that, so, but I wanted to compliment the guys on plowing the roads.
They've done a great
They've done a
job.
And we're on a side street, we're a cut-through, but we're on a side street. And it was interesting because the town went up and down the street, and then some private guy went up and down the street several times.
Oh, wow.
So how, does DPW track, do they tell them what areas they're supposed to plow, and are they tracking it by mileage? I mean, how is it that when you have the private contractors, what do you do with them, and how do
You
you
have
pay
assigned,
them?
you have assigned routes is how it works. And obviously the priority are to the main roads and secondary roads and then the minor roads. But yeah, they're given designated routes is how it works. Whether it's the contractors or the town employees. And so that's the only way you can, like you said, keep track of it and maintain it.
And I'm gonna put a plug in for our DPW department, because I've spent some time talking to our DPW director. And when you get one of these events, it's all hands on deck.
Right.
And our DPW chief is Christine Clancy. And you will find,
Stolen from Lowell.
stolen from Lowell.
yeah.
You will-
Chelmsford resident.
Chelmsford resident, you will find that when you get one of these major storms, Director Clancy herself is out on the road at 3 o'clock in the morning doing spotting duty, okay? Which means, going around saying, okay, we didn't get this one, we need to get this one, and directing. This is our director of DPW who is out in the morning. So it's all hands on deck, and I can't say enough about our DPW department. They do an outstanding job. Talk about the brining that they do. I mean, it's unbelievable. And she told me, I think I remember this correctly, that the brining in place of just dumping rock salt is a substantial cost saving.
Yes.
It's a lot cheaper for the town.
Think of it as diluted rock salt.
Exactly, but in my opinion, it does a better job, because it adheres to the road better. Rock salt, you drop it and it bounces and so on and so forth.
And if it's too cold, rock salt don't work real well. It needs
Correct.
a little
Yeah,
moisture.
It only doesn't work if it rains, because the rain will wash the brine out, just like the rock salt. That's the challenge, is if you've got a rainfall.
You have to watch the
You have
weather.
to watch the weather.
Right,
yeah.
right.
I want to
So
give a
I-
compliment to the Lowell DPW too, because our issue is how many thousands of cars are.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, brutal.
That's
brutal.
it. There's these little side streets, and they're not off the road, and
Right.
they don't use the garages like they should. And we towed hundreds of cars, and it's still not working.
So yesterday, we had this guy on, he was a guest, and I had a bunch of people ask after he left, how do we be in touch with this guy? This guy's name is Tyler Mercier, and he's city councilor Rita Mercier. It's her grandson.
Oh.
This kid lives in Dubai,
Wow.
and he's likes cryptocurrency. He does quite well with it. He has 119,000 people who follow him.
Wow.
So I texted Rita after he left yesterday, because people, hey, how can I be in touch with this guy? Because he's a local kid, but he lives in Dubai. And fantastic lifestyle this guy's got. So Rita's talked to him, and he wants to be in touch through a place called Instagram. All the kids know what Instagram is. And you go to digital.collects. Collects plural, not possessive, but you can see at the top of the screen here. I'll drag it down a tad. You go to Instagram.com, digital.collects, and that's Tyler's page. And you send him a message, and he'll be happy to correspond with you there. But this kid's doing fantastic over in Dubai. Rita and the gang of her family went to visit him in Dubai, and awesome pictures. And we didn't have enough time yesterday, so we're going to invite her back to talk about that again sometime. But again, you want to be in touch with Tyler, it's going to go to Instagram, digital.collects, plural. And the announcements for today. Today is the 20th. So we have over at the Lowell Senior Center, you got to be 60, you can live in Timbuktu, oven fried chicken. It's gonna, we have today.
There you go.
Sounds pretty good. Coming up on March 1st is Kids with Disabilities Sports versus Lowell Fire at the Maury Elementary School. That's all the information I have on this. Mark Kratman is running for re-election out in Tingsboro. No, I'm sorry, Tewksbury. Sorry, brain cramp. You are cordially invited to meet and greet reception. Committee to elect Mark Kratman, Tewksbury Select Board, Wednesday, March 5th, 6 to 10 p.m. at T.J. Callahan's, 1475 Main Street in Tewksbury. Moving right along, every Thursday in lovely Lowell, Massachusetts, through March 6th, is the Golden Gloves. And they've been doing this for 78 years. It's a good time. Bring your grandkids, and they'll show you what boxing's really all about. Pretty cool stuff. Out in Tewksbury, Health and Fair, April 9th at Tewksbury Senior Center, 175 Chandler Street in Tewksbury. It's 1 to 4 p.m. Questions or what? If you want to be a vendor, be in touch. Moving right along here. Veteran Support Group, February 21st, 10 a.m. at the Tewksbury Senior Center Conference Room. Support for veterans 60 plus.
Yeah.
They got a phone number there, so if you're interested, be in touch with them. They'd be happy to work with you. And that's the end of my announcements, Ev. Thank you.
There's one I'd like to throw in tonight at TD Gardens. You can watch USA against
Yes.
Canada.
Canada, yep.
If you want to go to the game, it's only $850.
$850. Oh, is it?
Up to 1,000 as
Yeah,
of this
and
morning.
within 10 minutes, you might see about 5 fights.
Yeah.
A lot of fighting going on.
They interviewed the coach this morning, and he said there will be a high degree of physicality.
Back to the old days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the way it
In terms
was.
of that,
Yeah.
yeah. John mentioned the Golden Gloves, and I think it was last week. My youngest son has seasonal tickets, and he took his oldest child. So that's my youngest granddaughter. And they chose her to do the 50-50 raffle.
Oh, okay.
So he sent a picture of Henley in the ring,
Oh, nice.
with the 50-50 raffle and thing. And
Is he on Facebook or something?
I don't know if they put her on Facebook.
Okay, never mind then, turn the page.
And I didn't ask if I could put her up on the
It's on
screen. and I'm very
Facebook, we don't
careful.
have to ask for permission.
I know that, but I don't think that they did that. I know he sent out something, and I didn't see anything posted. If it had been posted, it would have been sent to you. So besides the budget, we also have our capital
Yep.
expenses. Because of the way the budget is, have we decreased anything on capital?
No, we're still funding capital roughly $6 million out of our $168 million budget,
Wow.
which isn't a huge percentage, but to cut back on your infrastructure is just self-defeating and really sets up the next generation for pain, and that would
Well,
be
I know we're
irresponsible.
smarter than that in Chelmsford, but I have to ask the question because that's part of what the budget is, and where we're going to have a problem balancing that budget with and it isn't just the lack of revenue, it's what the expenses are.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
the lack of the income from the state, they're not sending it to us. So we're going to build 2 fire stations.
Yes.
So what is the status on those?
That is the case where that was excluded from Proposition 2.5, so it doesn't affect the budget in terms of the tax dollars available under the levy limit. The proposals were received yesterday for designers, and so those will be reviewed by the committee, the building committee, and then they'll hire a project manager, or clerk of the works, as more commonly known as. So we anticipate in the next several weeks that those positions will be secured, and then the design work will move forward during the remainder of this calendar year with the bidding and construction in calendar year 2026.
Do you have a date on the permanent building committee next meeting?
This coming Tuesday, I
Okay, that's what I
saw
thought.
an agenda for 6:30 over at the DPW.
Yep.
So doing these 2 projects simultaneously will save the town some money.
Yeah, exactly. And again, talking facilities that were built in the 1960s, so they're 60 years old and need reinvestment.
Oh, yeah,
So
absolutely.
and then obviously the big one that's out there is we've hired a known as project manager for the feasibility phase for the Parker Middle School project.
That's the next
Another school
question.
built in the 60s. And we are also finalizing the designer project for the, for a roof project over at the South Row School. The roof needs to be replaced. It's over 25 years old. So again, we're maintaining the infrastructure, because if you don't, you cause short-term problems in terms of roof leaks or infrastructure issues or problems to the operating of the facility, but then long-term, you put yourself in such a hole that it's hard to get out of. But you're correct. The big challenge with capital, much like the operating budget, is the construction costs are just ridiculous. In terms of the increase in construction costs over, the last half dozen years is phenomenal. And that's, again, affects homeowners. And that's how we best relate, is what people are experiencing in their personal lives, the government is also experiencing as an operating entity. And unlike a business that can just raise prices, we are constrained by Proposition 2.5 in terms of our revenue base.
It affects our new growth.
I think Lowell has that in the works. I think you're going to see a unit that just goes out and maintains our buildings, not cleaning them. I'm not talking janitorial cleaning. I'm talking repairing a roof or HVAC
You
units.
mean finally they're gonna do
Yeah,
that?
they're going to do something. I can constantly hear the talk about it. It's a lot of money.
Well, the ability Lowell's not at the levy limit, so it's a question of
Right.
how much of the tax levy will the city and residents support, because they're not constrained. We're at the levy limit. We cannot raise taxes as a town meeting or without the support of the voters, but the City of Lowell Council can raise above 2.5% per year, because you're not at the levy limit.
I'm not sure how many buildings, but I know we
Yep.
got about 28 schools, and then city buildings. The number's incredible how big of a job it is. And
Right.
we have a unit called Lands and Buildings, and they're just, nice people, and they do the best they can, but they're just not equipped to do such a big job. So I can see it coming, that they're going to have just,
The challenge for Lowell is how much state aid will the state continue to provide, the growth of state aid, because Lowell receives a significant portion of its budget from
About
the state,
60%.
and whereas Chelmsford receives less than 14%.
well, we appreciate you helping us. We know
do
Chelmsford
help
helps
you.
us. I know that, and we appreciate it here.
But that's just the realities in terms of what, look at the different funding challenges. Ours is the property tax base, the city's more dependent on state aid.
There's nobody in the town of Chelmsford that fought harder for that foundation budget than Evelyn. In my lifetime, I
And
watched.
that's
quite
coming
well.
up for renewal. There's
Yep.
only 1 year left of the current funding schedule by the legislature that was adopted in 2019. And now that's the big topic, is what will the new funding schedule be? Because the previous funding schedule was based on enrollment growth. And right now, that's really not a predominant driver in terms of education costs.
Well, on the railroad thing, where you have to build housing for a certain amount.
You mean the MBTA zoning? Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Close.
In Chelmsford,
Yes.
how many parking spaces are required per unit?
Well, in the MBTA zoning, there isn't any, because if you're in a transit area like a downtown, essentially they reduce or waive the parking requirements. Even the accessory dwelling units, that's limited to one maximum of one. The whole trend right now is to do away with parking requirements.
I want to build a five-story apartment building.
Yep.
In downtown Chelmsford.
Yep.
I don't need any.
Technically, there is a requirement. You basically almost need a space per dwelling unit. But again, that's relaxed if in the case, what we often do, because there is no on-street parking, we basically look towards the public parking areas, to accommodate that need. We own public parking behind the Oddfellows building, Fishbones Plaza there in the center. And so, but that was the whole purpose of the MBTA zoning, was
Right.
to eliminate the parking mandates, because it's seen now that people don't have the parking that they had.
Connecticut is requiring 2 parking spaces per unit.
Wow.
So my takeaway from all the information I've been able to grab,
Yeah.
because there's way too much verbiage in the law for me to process, is that it's up to the town. The town can say you need 2 spaces per unit.
Pretty much.
Your town seems to dilly-dally around that. You guys haven't decided how many spaces per unit.
Yeah.
And down the street here, the former Heinz Tavern, whether you know what it is, you probably.
Yeah, I did see that project, yeah,
And there's gonna be 80 people over there.
with no parking, yeah,
And there's 13 spaces that you can purchase one if you want to.
right,
They're all gonna park,
somewhere.
and the state just said it's okay, and the city council go, well, that's the law. And my takeaway, it's not the law. The C of Law could have said 1 or 2 parking spaces per unit, but they chose not to.
Yeah, I think there's this sense that people are going to go more towards this, ride-sharing type of arrangement where you use your Uber and your Lyfts and so forth, and,
Oh, don't forget the bikes.
yeah, and the bikes.
And they're
yeah.
gonna walk to
They're
the
gonna
train
walk to
station.
the train station, yeah. That's the
It's
concept.
gonna be a
but-
cluster. That's gonna be terrible.
It's terrible. The city council should change it around, but it's not a city day, so I'll turn the page. Thanks.
So,
Right, but we're
city
also
life.
making a comparison from one city and/or town to Chelmsford. And since you know all the ins and outs of the area, so it's not that we can't talk about some of this stuff.
But I don't think Dracut has the same situation that Chelmsford does
No, and in
in
Drake,
terms
you
of
need.
land availability and things of that
And that's the
nature.
notion that if you're in
Right.
Drake, you need a vehicle to get in there.
Exactly.
Whereas if you're in downtown Lowell, as you said, you could walk to the train station, get a bus to the downtown.
In theory.
In theory. But
Oh,
that's,
today?
yes.
I can put the shades up, and you can see how many people actually walk to the train station.
But that's the-
Compared to how many cars go by.
Right.
Every Tom, Dick, and Mary has a car,
Yep.
because you can hop in your car and go to Walmart in Tewksbury
Your
anytime you
car
want.
is your
Right.
freedom,
Right.
okay?
Everybody's got a car. Poor
Your
people have
car
a car.
is your freedom.
If you don't have insurance, you just register it in New Hampshire.
There you go.
So in Chelmsford, we did have, whatever you want to call them, migrants, illegal aliens, different things. It didn't seem to impact as much as some of the other communities. With the current administration in Washington DC, have you seen less or decreases in the numbers in Chelmsford?
No, and the reason you see the impact is we house individuals, not families, because the state has different facilities, meaning they don't commingle generally individuals with family. So, whereas the Lowell facility is family housing, at the old Inn and Conference Center, the Chelmsford facility at the old Best Western is individuals, and that's still at capacity. In terms of the state's, sheltering program. So it has had a significant, it hasn't had an impact on the school system, but it's had an impact on police and fire and building response, because, they're there frequently, for, medical and disturbance calls and so forth. So, but
Yeah, because I
no,
noticed-
it hasn't waned at all, no.
In other communities, they're closing a lot of the shelter areas because people have left. Or they've moved on, or there's something else going on that we may not
Well,
be
the
aware
state,
of.
the state has constrained the funding because
Right.
they changed the requirements, the length of stay and so forth. And as was noted, there is fewer people crossing the border.
A lot fewer.
And so therefore, the impact is lessened, but no, we're still at operating, the facility's still being operated at capacity in Chelmsford. It's also the winter season, which also brings more people in because of the severe cold.
Now, we were talking in the first hour about the utility bills, and Chelmsford has a group rate. Have you had a lot of phone calls?
For electric.
For aggregation, for electricity supply, yes.
Yeah, and have you had a lot of complaints about the costs?
Yeah, and in fact, if you remember when the state reps were in and the senator were in the fall, we flagged this early, and I think people were like, well, what? People were a little caught off guard because it hadn't hit its full zenith of impact, and sure enough, it's come. And the interesting part is it's not just the supply cost, which is what the electricity program, aggregation program in Chelmsford does. This is the state utility mandated distribution cost, because they're using it to fund the Mass Save and other programs.
And we talked about that in the last hour, didn't we?
Right, but we
And
wanted to
so-
pick it up in this hour
But
also.
that's as I think the best quote I read in one of the stories was, it's easy to do that than to raise taxes by closing it through regulations.
That's exactly what they did.
And that's what they did. Yeah.
And just to bring Paul up to speed, and I won't go through my entire rant that I did the last half of the hour, I actually went back and examined my last gas bill and to try to figure out what the deal was, and to make a long story short, the distribution charge on my bill was $500. The actual gas was $202.
exactly.
Okay? And what I found in working backwards through the various different taxes and fees, and, there's like 15 different things, ingredients that go into your distribution
Yeah.
charge. $143 of that $500 was directly attributable to me subsidizing people to change over to electric.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So that's what they've done, all right?
Yep.
And so I am a gas user,
Yep.
and I am being charged so that we can help people transition to electricity.
right.
And let me tell you something, I don't like that, okay?
If you had oil heat, you'd have been all set, Sam.
Well, there you
So
go.
far,
There you
because
go, and the
It's
reality
actually
is...
been a better winter for people in oil heat.
Exactly, but from an environmental standpoint, natural gas is better
They used to
than
call it the
oil.
clean
It's a
energy.
cleaner
That's
burning
right.
fuel.
That's right.
So it's another,
and-
government thing,
And
okay?
but the sad part is no one takes ownership of it. I think if people stood up and said, "This is what I'm doing and this is why," then people, then you could agree to disagree.
Channel
But it was
5
sort of done without.
Channel 5 interviewed the governor,
Yeah.
and her response was, "Oh, well, yeah, well, we're going to look into that
Yeah,
right
we're
away."
gonna have the state-
As
yeah.
if she didn't know. She knew. Of course she knew. She appointed two-thirds of the DPW Regulatory
Yeah.
Board. She knew, okay? And she has a political mindset that this is okay.
Sam,
because
if she run today, she'd win again.
Of course she would,
Depends who she's running against.
yeah.
I don't think so. I think it would depend who she was running against.
Kraft
If she's
got
running
some
against
dough.
if she's running against a poor opponent like the last time, she would win again.
Yeah.
If she was running against Charlie Baker, she would not win.
Oh, no, Baker would be
That's what I'm saying.
reelected,
Elections
It has
are
to
about
do with-
who's in the race.
It has to do with how the media presents the competition.
Well,
And
and
they
also
have
the-
Kraft, and they all love football, so they're going to kiss Kraft's feet.
But it also depends on the quality of the, the quality of the candidate and how, like you said, how they deliver their message. And unfortunately, it isn't always quality on either side at a given time. And that's really what governs elections. People, whether it's a federal election or a state election or a local election, it comes down to who's in the race.
Yep.
And what's the quality of the candidate and their message.
However, advertisers can make Burger King look very tasty.
Well,
I think Kraft's going to lose, but I think the mayor will win.
He won't lack for funding, I can tell you that.
So, one of the biggest topics that everybody talks about is audits. Especially at the federal level. However,
audits.
we have had discussions here about the fact that communities have audits. And so I know Chelmsford has.
financial audits, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Not audits of energy. I mean, there's all that other stuff that can come in, and you've
Right.
got outside consultants. But as far as the financial audit, where, they actually open up the books and take a look at everything. And a lot of times when I was on the school committee, it seemed as though they were selective in what they actually looked at, and it wasn't like they always went line item by line item. But in order for anybody that happens to be listening to this to understand how it occurs locally, and then if you know how it differs from one community to the other, to just explain how it works in Chelmsford.
Yeah, I want to say
Please.
it's an audit to make sure that your financial practices are sound and legal. It's not, they're not evaluating how you're spending your money. So it's not a question of, should this money have been spent for X, Y, or Z? It's basically saying, are you maintaining your books in a proper form?
Correct.
And are your expenditures legal in conformance with the requirements? So it's a financial regulatory audit. And it's pretty uniform across communities. I mean, they come in and they have a standard checklist. They come in, they look at your expense vouchers, they look at your bank statements and so forth. So that's what it is. It's a financial compliance audit. It's not a what you see on TV now with Elon Musk saying, well, gee, the town spent money on,
No.
paying for, expenses that really aren't worthy of consideration. So I think that's the difference between what you're seeing at the federal level now. They're questioning how the money was spent, not whether it was legal expenditure. And so that's the difference. But at a local level, and the state has one every year as well, there's a legal financial compliance audit to make sure that you're complying with the federal and state and regulations.
And
in terms
general
of
accounting
expenses.
principles
Exactly.
as well. And to Paul's point, they don't look at every transaction, they can't possibly, but they do test in transactions in usually the high volume transactional areas. That's what they do. And it's done every year, and they
Make sure it's
they make
legal.
their report,
And
and they,
it's the same thing with
Right.
assessing property. The state makes you submit your reports of
Same
sales to
thing.
assess value to make sure that you're complying with the requirement that properties be assessed with 10% of market value.
Correct.
So that's what it is. So it's a financial compliance audit. I don't want people to think that they're auditing to see that we spent our money wisely.
No.
It's more of a question of
No, the vote
was
is
it legal?
because that's a matter of opinion.
Right. Right, yeah, exactly.
Well, we don't have the same type of budget at the local level as they do at the state or the
No,
federal level.
but you've got to, like, for example, the school department budget's $75 million. No one's coming in questioning, well, gee, how did they spend the $75 million? And, did they have too many teachers' aides, or did they have, did they buy too many reams of copy paper? That's not what's going on here.
Right, because when they caught the $850,000 in the special education, it wasn't that you spent $850,000, it was when you spent
Right.
it.
It wasn't
Exactly.
accounted for
Paul, how do
properly.
you keep track of inventory? I remember yesteryear when I had youth on my side, and I got into this hobbyist media stuff. I get a tour of schools. I remember going into more than one school.
Yeah.
That the corridors, the middle of the corridors, were lined with photocopy paper. Case
Probably
after case.
the beginning of, was it the beginning of the school year?
It was
That's
near
where they
the end of the
near the end. Okay, because normally they sort of buy a bulk because you want to take advantage of bulk pricing, and then you sort of draw from the inventory during the school
How do
during the
you
school
keep
year.
track of it? How much is too much? Because I remember talking to one retired school committee member that says, well, they squirrel stuff away.
Yeah, there's never too much. I mean, for example, if you come and look at our salt piles and our salt sheds at the end of March, you'll see them full. One is you don't know the weather, but two is if you have a year where you've got funding available, like you said, you'll kind of get a head start. And I think the same thing happens in the schools or on the general government side is if you have funding available at the end of the fiscal year, you'll often make the expenditures to get yourself a head start, or in the case of the schools, they can prepay some of the special education costs, which is all legal, because you're always sort of trying to fight that downside year. And this year being, for example, a snow and ice downside year, the fact that our salt sheds were full at the beginning of the winter, gave us, sort of a bit of a cushion to absorb a more severe year. And I think that's what happens in the schools, John, or any other department, is if there's funding available as they're nearing the end of the fiscal year, they'll buy durable goods like copy paper or supplies or books or what have
Well,
you.
I think the celebration mode
Yeah.
was Christmas in April is what they used to call it.
Yeah, exactly, because people are going to get chastised if they overdraw their budget, so they'll kind of hold a little bit, and then once they can see what they need to get to the end, then they'll make the purchases. But I think the important thing is it's generally not waste. That copy paper that they'll buy in April,
They're going to use it.
they're going to use it in September. So it's not wasteful in terms of, it's not something that you'll be throwing away because it's spoiled and so forth. So, that's fairly common across communities, and I think,
Still happening in 2025.
yeah, and I think businesses would do the same thing. If you're going to get because you're going to get your taxes. So if you're nearing the end of your tax year, you see it, right? People
Yeah.
say you have this much left, and taxes are coming. You'll buy expenditures to record them in the tax year.
It used to be that
reduce
way.
your right? Yeah, but that's generally how it's done.
Well, when we had to, when you go on an individual basis and you had all the other tax cuts come in, yeah, you could prepay, but because you can't do the deductions, because you don't have enough deductions, it's irrelevant whether you prepay
You're
anymore.
limited to $10,000.
'Cause that had, yeah, it had to do with real estate taxes. We always did that.
Yep.
In order to offset the
But
income.
My next question to Paul was fire trucks.
Yes.
Lowell's boasting, oh, we bought brand new fire trucks with ARPA money.
Yes.
We didn't save up for it. Does Chelmsford use ARPA money to buy fire trucks, or do
We
you save
did.
up
We
for it?
bought a rescue truck with ARPA money, but we've had an aggressive fire apparatus plan for the last 20 years, so we're on schedule. The problem with fire trucks is they're ridiculously expensive. What has happened in that industry, much like many other industries, venture capital has bought the fire manufacturers for the apparatus, so there's a concentration of manufacturers, which means less competition, less production, and the prices have gone up, by 50% in 6 years, easily.
Doesn't
So-
Toyota make one?
No, and so there's a case now where there's holding companies that control most of the market. You saw the same thing with school bus companies, right? You go for school bus transportation. How many companies bid on the city of Lowell's school or the town of Chelmsford school bus transportation? One, because the market has, and this is where I think the state and the federal government has dropped the ball. Going back, if you went back to 100 years about antitrust and so forth, the lack of competition is what's driving the pricing.
They regulate the wrong things.
Well, yeah,
Exactly.
there used to be a thing against monopolies, and that's all we see now.
Right, exactly.
And
Because we were told for a generation, bigger is better. We need to have concentrated companies so we can compete globally. That was the message in the state and federal for a generation was we had to allow the banks to merge. We had to allow these companies to merge because
Yep.
they were competing globally. The problem, the downside they missed of that is at the local level, there wasn't the competition. And so right now, when you go and buy a fire truck, the lead time is almost 2 years.
Okay.
And the cost is ridiculous.
Sliding back to my
Because
the issue.
you can't just go to somebody and say, hey, set up a factory and produce the chassis for fire
It's not like
apparatus.
Very
Buy a
important
car.
question. What color is the new fire truck?
Hopefully,
In
usually
Lowell?
red.
Yeah.
Usually they're red, right?
Unless St. Tom wants something different, they're red.
Okay, because
Yeah.
some communities, they're not red.
I want
In
them to
Pittsburgh,
put-
they were black and gold
Right.
because
Well,
that's
set
the
this
colors.
aside. I want them to put the year they purchased them on the side of the truck. Just say it's a 2025 truck.
That's
The city
okay.
doesn't want to do that.
Why
So
not?
I asked, yesterday we had Kim Scott and Corey Robinson here. Rita Mercy was here too. But I asked Corey and Kim, how do we save up for fire trucks? They said they have a capital plan. What do you have in Chelmsford to save up, and can you divert that money someplace else if you feel like it?
I don't know how you would do that. I mean,
if you've earmarked capital money
if you
for
earmark
something,
it, you can't move the money otherwise. If the appropriation was for capital, then it has to be spent for that purpose. I don't know how you can move it without going back to another council vote in the city.
Well, I think
right.
I think that the managers successfully have, because we couldn't afford fire trucks even though we had a capital
But they
fund.
used ARPA. They used ARPA money.
The ARPA money just
The
grew
city
up
got
came together like an earthquake.
Right.
Here's a chunk of dough, get rid of it.
exactly.
But the ARPA money's not coming back.
No.
How
So
much
that'll be a problem 15, 20 years
I'm
from
just
now.
asking
How much
every
ARPA
community
money
leader
did Lowell
like
get?
yourself, how are we saving up for new
72
fire
million, I
trucks?
believe.
72 million?
Basically,
what I believe,
we have a regular capital budget, and we do a 5-year plan. So we know, we're going to spend roughly, in this case, $6 million plus per year. And so you look at your roofs and you look at your fire apparatus and so forth. This year, we're not buying a fire apparatus, but I believe next year's plan calls for a fire apparatus. And so it gets budgeted and planned.
But your $6 million is not the original appropriation request. You start off with a
usually
higher
double
number.
that, usually double that.
And
yeah.
then your capital committee looks at it during the year, and then you wind up with whatever the money is, and then it goes before town meeting, and town meeting has to approve it. Now,
Right.
theoretically, and it has happened in the past,
Yeah.
not the recent past, but town meeting could cut your capital budget.
Right.
Okay,
And then
they
the other
could.
way of doing it is the city and often look towards grants. They look for the federal government, because the
Right.
federal government provide an earmark to replace a equipment or a fire truck. I mean, that's been done as well, but now those days are changing as well, that the federal, and I think that's the concern, is the dependency on federal money is going to have an impact at the, state and local level. Because the idea of, the new federalism, whereas, that's going to have an impact because, the federal money is not going to be there, because I think if the intent is that they're going to balance the federal budget or attempt to, That's really to me, that's the big question is what are we leaving for the generation after us? And if we're leaving them with a huge deficit and continue to deficit spend, eventually you're going to have to pay the price on that.
Well, that's what they've been saying.
Right.
And we can easily see that as far as printing money, and then about the fraud and the waste and different things where they don't even have,
I hope Trump goes to Fort Knox.
they don't even have, I know that in the school department budget and in our local budget, there are codes for everything on a line item of how you spend it. And then there's codes for what the revenue is that's coming in so that then you can track it by those numbers. But they have found that there's a lot, I mean, could be in the billions of dollars where there are no codes. So they can't track where the money was spent, where it went.
Well, you would think the financial audit would would help that because the problem.
But we
the
don't
federal
have that
government's-
issue
it's
on
so
local level.
huge, right?
Yes.
The
But
federal
it's
government's
worse,
so huge.
it's worse with foreign aid, because
Right.
once the money leaves the country, you have no idea whether
Right.
it was spent for that purpose. And if you look at some of the categories of program that they have,
It's questionable.
you know that it wasn't spent for those things. So how much of that money did the foreign government officials skim and take? Okay, I mean,
You've always said, Sam, we get the good bang for the buck in Lowell.
oh, you do?
I'm preparing for another property tax raise. I think our taxes are going up.
But you get
There's
it.
no other spot to
but
get money.
As I've said before many times, low residential property taxpayer gets a tremendous bang for his buck, okay, in terms of what he actually has to pay for real estate tax, because A, your values are lower than they are in surrounding towns. B, your property tax only funds 35% of your budget. And you just heard the town manager say that the property tax funds approximately 75%
Yep.
of the Chelmsford budget. That is huge, huge, okay? So you get a
Once
wonder,
again,
you
that's
get a
why I
wonderful
brought
bang
up-
for your buck. If you want to own your own home in Lowell, it's a bargain. From a tax standpoint, it's a bargain.
when it's probably costing the city over $20,000 per student to educate a
Right.
student in the city.
Well, the city does not live within its means, and that's just reality.
Well, they have to adopt a balanced budget
They have
every year
to,
by state
right.
law. What they do is they receive a significant amount of their money from federal and state
Correct.
revenue sources, and the question is when those sources get constrained, then that's what has the impact on the city being able to maintain services.
So, in other words, if they cut that, it wouldn't affect us as much as it would
Right.
affect the city of
correct.
Lowell, because we don't rely as much on that type of funding.
Yeah, generally the federal funding in the town is in the school department. Yeah, that's
Correct.
generally where it goes in terms of the federal funding to support education.
Have you had any indications, I know you have to be limited because it's executive sessions, on the negotiations with the unions in the school department, if they're going to be able to, with all of the, I would assume that we're going to have to decrease budgets, but are there obstacles with settling those contracts because we have limited funds in order to increase wages?
No, they're concerned with what the market is. I've been in negotiations with public safety and other unions on the town side, and they're much like we've seen in other communities on the school side with the teacher strikes and so forth. They're just concerned because they look at it from their cost of living. The teachers are dealing with the same inflation, and now the case with the health insurance I mentioned earlier. If the health insurance premiums are going up by 17.77%, which is a fact, then their share of the contribution is going up by 17.77%. So it comes the end of the day if they're taking withholdings for their health insurance contribution, they're going to basically receive less money net when their paycheck is cut to them. So therefore, they're not inclined to say, in a period of high inflation, to take less when they're experiencing the same thing in their personal lives.
And so when you say that the health insurance costs are less, and we're going to run out of time here, has anybody evaluated, or do you know the answer to this question as to why are they going up?
Yes. We see it because our claims are running at our premiums. That's why we're having to make the adjustments, because they're losing money because you have other costs that go beyond just your claims. It's being driven by utilization. It's being, meaning people more often are using medical services. They're using prescription drugs, whether it's the weight loss drugs, or you turn on your TV any night, you'll find more commercials on why you should take certain medications or everything else. So it's really driven by utilization in the cost of healthcare. The healthcare inflation is significant, and we saw that with the case with the Stewart crisis and so forth, and Mass General losing money and so forth.
So there is some validity to the comment that we should be, if we were a healthier society,
Yeah, that's
our
right.
medical costs would go down.
Or you use less,
Tomorrow's show
Right.
is,
Go ahead.
host is going to be Cliff Krieger and Eileen Del Rossi. Melanie Gilbert was supposed to come. She's coming next Friday. And I got 2 texts I'm going to close out with. Charlie Big could win, but most of the Trump butt kissers despise him, so they're staying home on Election Day because this guy doesn't like Trump. He comes here. John Curtis, the guy's name. And the last one, when are the voters in mass going to wake up and stop voting for Democrats?
Never.
Back to you guys. Thanks.
Well, I think they got to understand there's different different gradients of Democrats. There's conservative Democrats and there's liberal Democrats, and I think
Progressives.
exactly. And I think that's
Right.
that's the struggle within the Democratic Party.
About a
is-
third of the mass legislature are more moderate
Exactly.
Democrats.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's
I
the
agree with
struggle.
that.
And you see that between the two branches of government at the state level, between the House being
Mm-hmm.
more conservative than the progressive Senate. And that's even though you don't have the different party, you tend to have squabbles within the party.
Right.
Well, anyway, we're coming to the end of the show. Thank you so much. You've given an awful lot of information
as
for
always.
anybody out there that wanted to tune in this morning or when we repeat it again in Chelmsford. And thanks to my co-hosts, Sam Chase and Bob Hoey, for getting up extra special early. Everybody stay warm. If you can afford to stay warm, and we'll see you next week. John Moses is supposed to be with us next Thursday. And everybody stay safe. Have a great day.
Bye.